It should ask you if that's okay to record. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. So, hi. How about you tell me a little bit about yourself, your project, and what inspired you for your capstone?
Sure. So, I guess I'll just start off with kind of what inspired me. So, like, 'cause it is such a long, it's been such a long year, just like getting my thesis to where it is now. But I did start off with, yes, the DC riots on January 6th of last year. And I'm from right outside of DC, and I was home when all that was going down. And that was like what I think like 2 weeks before the semester started. And I knew I was taking thesis. So I was like, oh, this would be kind of like I don't know, like an interesting like starting point to get like a thesis going. So I brought that up in class, I was like, how could like the National Mall, this like space that's designed for like, the First Amendment, like meeting democracy, all this stuff. Like DC is supposed to be the city that is like, meant for that, lead to this, right? And it was like tricky because I was trying to like turn it into like a researchable thesis topic that wasn't like too crazy, something that I could do within like the year or so that I have. And we're going to these thesis one meetings, and the advisor's like, okay, like this is cool, but you need to like, I guess hone it down, or like you're still missing something. It's still, it was just like this needs to be more applicable to like planning, or I don't know. So like over time, like throughout thesis one, because in planning we do 2 semesters, right? So during that time period, I'm just like, I don't like, how do I do this, right? And then it finally comes to this semester, and I'm meeting with Juan Camilo, who's one of my favorite teachers here at Pratt. And we were like, well, why don't we, instead of looking at DC, right? Like DC could be like the starting point, right? Like what inspired this. But like, how about we like hone it down a little bit, make it a little more approachable and, more relevant, I guess, to like us at Pratt by looking at Pratt's campus. It's small enough area where it's like, easily doable in a couple semesters. It's a, quasi public space. Like it's not a technical public space, but the public at least could before COVID access it. So it's like, yeah, why not look at that and think about how it's like a good, like, public space for, I don't know, protest, meeting, that kind of thing. And then it's kind of like evolved, like as I was doing research, like primary research for my thesis, I was starting to look at like how like security measures and stuff can kind of like detract from like the publicness of a space. And what really came to mind was just like security things like, walls, or like the physical presence of security guards, gates. At least now with COVID, like it's like checkpoints where you have to check your vaccine status and if you're a student or not. I was kind of looking at that and how that can be like, I guess, detrimental, or how that affects how the space is used, if that makes sense.
No, definitely, it makes sense. Yeah. So I find that really interesting coming from like an architecture background. One of the first days I had orientation, they actually took us around campus, and we had like a history of Pratt almost. And one of the main things that they mentioned was that and I see that you also mentioned it here as well, that there really is no history, I guess, behind the reason why we have like these walls or gates or fences around the campus, and that it creates a sense of unwelcomeness, refuge from dangerous neighborhoods and such. Could you maybe go into that a little bit more, and like maybe add in your opinion on maybe a resolve that Pratt should look into?
Sure. So that was something. So when I spoke with Heather Lewis, um, she was kind of telling me about the beyond and between Pratt's Gates, what they were doing, and one of the things that she did mention was that like, yeah, the history behind the walls and the gates is kind of like muddy. So it's like part of this class is like they're doing some really cool things, with just some like historical documentation of like the campus.
Mhm.
And that was one thing that stood out. I was like, oh, it's like it's this topic that's, it's clearly controversial. People don't like, or a lot of people don't like that there are these walls, or it's a very unwelcoming. seemingly unwelcoming space. And yeah, so I yeah, she told me that, it's like the history behind that is a little muddy. And that's kind of what they're working on with the semester. I haven't really delved into that yet. At least in my stage of thesis, I am taking an extra semester because I have some outstanding credits that still need to be done. So I'm utilizing all of that time to continue my thesis. Um, but I think so that's actually something, as I'm approaching the recommendations phase for my thesis, that I was like considering. It's like, well, yeah, what is going to be like the alternative, right? Is it tearing down the walls? Like, I mean, they're there for seemingly a reason, but it's like, do we still need it? Like what you mentioned, it's like, do they kind of like imply that the neighborhood is maybe unsafe? Like you need to be protecting this area from some outside force. So I'm not really sure, like, and there's like, probably a whole bunch of logistics behind like tearing it down. Like what could that do? There's a bunch of security guards that work there. Like, would they lose their jobs? Would they not be needed anymore? So it's a whole thing. And that's not to take the easy way out, but that's something I haven't that I will be approaching soon.
Sure. Yeah, I know that it's quite interesting because when you're on campus, like the greenery, it has these art pieces that are seemingly almost like an open space that wants to draw a community in, but really can't. I know like when I first came to campus, it was like during COVID that I got accepted and I wanted to go and view campus. And because I wasn't like technically a full student yet, I couldn't actually go in. So I was almost like peering through these gates, almost like it was like a jail outside, you know? It
Yep.
was very weird. And I know that another thing that Professor Ron Schiffman mentioned was that the campus library was actually, I believe, one of the first public libraries in Brooklyn. Do you think that with your project, maybe you'll touch on that and like the importance of that in any way? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, so that's actually something that's been asked a bunch when we do like our peer review sessions for thesis this semester, where it's like, right now I'm looking at like the literal outdoor space, right? The campus, the greenery, all that like area. But someone asked, was like, well, have you considered like the buildings, right? So it's like the library, like opening these up to the public. And I'll be honest, I haven't, like, that isn't something. And this is also just mainly due to like COVID making it super tricky, because my thought process with this was that, because of COVID, right, you're getting checked when you come into the campus, and then you're getting checked again when you go into these buildings. So it's like my whole thing was like, well, maybe we don't need to have these kind of checks to get into the campus itself, since you're already going to get checked once you go into the building. So yeah, my whole, at least, spin has been on the physical campus. But like I'm more than willing, like this is of the first step, right? This is just the beginning of like what could be like a huge research project, or it's just a part, like you're doing something very similar, and then like, Lewis in that class is very similar. So like this is obviously like a first step um, towards maybe eventually opening up more stuff to the public. But
Sure.
it isn't something I've been looking into too hard, at least yet.
Sure, yeah. I know Pratt has had a large history in, almost having like an affordable education for all. And it feels like, it's almost become like a way to monetize like the Pratt as almost like a company. And I feel like it lost that personal feel, and it almost makes it unattainable for some of like the local community members, people who are close by, not only by just the walls, but now like with the price tag. I know as a student, we definitely probably know that hands-on.
Oh yeah.
But do you ever envision like personally that the school will maybe drop its prices a little bit, or try to become like have programs, even if it's not like a full degree program, maybe like some sort of educational programs that will reach at a community level?
I think so. I think there are, at least when I started, I do remember there being like GIS programs that you could take, that you didn't have to be a student for. They were just kind of like I don't remember, it was like some kind of like certificate of like GIS prowess that you would get. But
Sure.
I do know that they had something like that that anybody could do. So I could see that happening. I guess right now, like it's just like COVID has just messed so many things up where it's like I don't know for the
Yeah.
foreseeable future, like the at least like or rather the immediate future. But I can't see that happening. But as for the prices, I think it's just going to keep going up.
Yeah. Sure. And I guess as we kind of end off on some of these major topics, is there anything, any final remarks that you kind of want to let everyone know about? Any like important things that we should consider going forward and look out for?
Um, Interesting. I guess I'm trying to think. So my guess would just be, or my what to look out for is just, I guess, at least when it comes to public space, just to keep in mind how draconian security measures can really detract. Um, I don't know. It's something that, you know, I'm still working on, but it's like I've found a lot of like resources where it's like, you know, if you have a public space and you put in security measures, it's going to like instill this sense of paranoia in its users, in that there is an imminent danger that's looming, and by being in this space you are protected from it, but it's like maybe as soon as you leave you're at risk again. And it's, I think it's just bad, for the like the fabric of the neighborhood, right? Because like, you know, this neighborhood, like Clinton Hills, it has gone from, you know, it was at once a poor black neighborhood, and now there's a lot of rich white families that live there. And it's kind of, you know, we don't want to see Pratt as like part of this problem of like alienation and seclusion. And like you said, like the school started off like Charles Pratt's like vision was to create this inclusionary place for education where like anybody can come and get it. And back then it was apparently affordable, but it's like, you know, like it's if Pratt's got this kind of like, um supposed to be seen as this inclusionary space of learning, you know, like the physical nature of the space should also be like inclusionary. And I guess it's just something that I keep coming back to. It's like it's COVID, like, right, like how would this topic look like 2 years ago?
Mhm.
So it's that definitely makes things super complicated, but I think, yeah, just going forward, my biggest thing is just, I don't know, maybe getting rid of all these like crazy security measures. I Quick aside, I was on campus, main campus, because like, um the School of Planning is on Higgins, which is like two
Yeah,
blocks
I
away
was
from the
gonna mention
campus.
that too.
Yeah, so it's like I don't spend super like that much time on the main campus anyways. So like when I started at Pratt, it was in the fall of 2019. So we were in person. Like I could go to the campus if I wanted to, and hang out and whatever. But it's like now, like if you have planning students that are coming in and they're starting at Higgins, like, you know, the main campus is kind of like this like weird, it's like this well, we're the islands, but like from our perspective, like, you know, the main campus is off to the side, it's like walled off, it kind of seems like this gated community. And I don't know, it's not something that seems as welcoming. And I I've never had any classes on main campus until this semester, where it's Ron Schiffman's democracy, equity, and public space class, where we started off meeting online, but then the last couple of classes, like my last 3 or 4 classes, have been in person on the main campus. So I've been going there a lot, and so I've been starting to like actually like see how the campus operates more. And I ride my bike to class, and I remember like, you know, coming in through one of the gates and getting very rudely yelled at to get off my bike. And they're like, you know the rules. And I was like, oh well, I don't. I'm sorry. Like the paths through the campus seem very wide to like accommodate bikes. So I
Yeah,
had, and I don't see signs that say no biking.
I've never
But
seen a sign that says that either. And
yeah, so I was just like, oh, okay,
even
sorry. So I
like
like
parking on
walked it.
campus, like I was a commuter, so I mean, and I came in during COVID, but I had to, first of all, you don't know what exit to go through, exit to come in and come out of, and I remember going in, and then you have to like stop and then show your thing, and you're in the car, so obviously, I mean, if anywhere you drive anywhere in Brooklyn, it takes a while, but you're not on your phone while you're driving, hopefully. And then you have to stop in the traffic and create problems, and then show them the thing, and then drive in, and then you got to drive all around campus and park. And by the time you park, I mean, again, like I find it really interesting that you brought up that our building is off campus, because I find that our building is so much more a part of the city than main campus. And you have to walk through this entire main campus. You can't go out some of the exits because they're closed because of COVID. So there's only like two, I think, ways that you can go, which is the front exit, or there's like another one on the opposite side, the turnstiles. And then by the time you get out of there, it's like, oh, wait a second, am I, like that idea of like, am I in danger now that I'm not enclosed in these walls? It's very weird, because when I go through the building and when I go through the city, I'm not really, I'm feeling like a regular connection. But then in order to like get back into campus on the way home, it's like, oh, now I have to swipe my card and this, that, and the other. And if I park in the street, is my car any less safe than it is in campus? It's really brings up like a lot of questions that I find really interesting, that you also see and also bring up. And I'm curious to see if there are other, I mean, there has to be other students, other professors on campus who kind of feel that same way,
Yeah, so
New
that
York City
was
is so rich.
right. That was actually one of the things I've been talking to people, students, people in my cohort, just kind of like
Yeah.
asking them about, like, what do you think about like the main campus as a public space, but also including Higgins Hall, right? And
Yeah.
um, the first thing that always gets brought up is the walls and the gates and the security,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, public space shouldn't have guards
Yeah.
intimidating you to come in. And then when you look at Higgins, I mean, Higgins is much smaller, but there is that like little like plaza area in front where everybody hangs out, and there is no wall, right? It's just this open like plaza. That's actually something I probably should look into more, what the rules are, if anybody could just come and sit there.
Yeah.
But like I love, hanging out there before class. It's just like a very communal spot. Everybody hangs out there, and there's no walls. So it's like, at least from my perspective, it's very welcoming. And then yeah, you just have to walk in and show your ID once you're inside. So it's like there's that less added level of security, the unnecessary security, I guess, that the main
Yeah.
campus has.
I mean, like I was even thinking, like I was plotting the idea during our orientation walk. Like it would be interesting. Like, I mean, I get it. Undergraduate school, like the kids are younger. That's their first time maybe out of the house. Maybe they're from different countries. They're unfamiliar. Like there should be a level of security there, right? But I mean, I went in my first year, I went to New York Institute of Technology for my undergraduate, and we dormed at Old Westbury, SUNY, and we used their older dorms, and there was no walls. There was like, when you came onto campus, there was like one checkpoint that you just showed your ID and you went in, but it didn't really feel like, oh well, I'm not supposed to be here, or other people aren't supposed to be here. If you had a guest, you would just be like, he's my guest, okay, cool, and you kind of just drove in. I feel like with Pratt, when I first went in there, I mean, I love the school, I'm so grateful to be here, but I felt very like unwelcome. Like I want to bring people to campus, there's so much history, so many things that I want to show them, and you can't do that. And yeah, there's the aspect of COVID, but I mean, it is an outdoor space, like you were saying. Like, I should be able to, bring my family, bring my friends, to show them these structures, to show them like, oh, this is what I'm learning about, this aspect of Brooklyn, and the public library that they had, and everything like that, without having to show them through like these bars, essentially.
Yeah,
um
it's sad you can't do that. Like
yeah.
I had friends visiting a couple months ago, and they were staying at one of their friends' places that was like 2 blocks away from Pratt, and I was like, oh perfect, I can come show you campus. But I remember walking over, I was like, oh yeah, there's a good chance I won't be able to get in.
Yeah.
Sure enough, I walk up to the security guard, and I was like, hey, like, here I go, here's my ID, these are my friends, can I just show them around campus? And there was no.
Yeah, which
It's
it's
like,
like, I get COVID is a risk, but also like you're losing that sense of community, like that sense of pride and passion. And like there should be some maybe boundaries, some protection for like even the parking lot. If they want like everyone in the city parking there, and they don't have to deal with people towing, they could have like a gate there, and maybe a gate around the dorms, so that that is safe. Like I understand those aspects of it, but I mean, some of the regular community buildings, like even if they, I mean, this is 2021, even if they were like a regular key swiped building. Like not everyone in the city, that's what a lot of apartment buildings do. There's a code or a key. So, I mean, we have ID cards. Isn't that like something that we could consider?
Right. Yeah. It's a lot can be changed. And
Yeah.
one of the things that that comes up a lot is like NYU, and like how
Mhm.
NYU doesn't have like a, a traditional campus that's like, demarcated by walls or whatever, like ours, but it's just kind of like their buildings are just kind of like thrown without or throughout that neighborhood. And it's,
Mhm.
there, that's actually somebody I'm reaching out to talk to. They're like security, but it's like, they've done it, right? It's like that you can have a college like be kind of open to like
Yeah.
walk through, because like, like if you're not like a NYU student, I can't imagine you can just like walk into their building and like
Yeah.
get inside, right, without swiping a key. But it's like you can still walk through that like neighborhood block and stuff, right? So it's like I don't see why that same logic can't apply to Pratt, where you can just cut through. Because
Yeah.
like people, Pratt students cut through there. There's an apartment building right across from
Mhm.
the Myrtle, or in between Myrtle and Pratt, right? That
Yeah.
people walk through to get to the it's like the health center, right? There's those buildings over by Pratt, or by Myrtle Avenue, that Pratt has, and it's
Mhm.
like our students are cutting through, these people's apartment building, like the parking lot, like out front. We're kind of doing that. It's like, why can't, if they need to cut through our campus, they can't do it. So it's kind of like this weird,
Yeah. And like
I don't know if
even
it's super comparable, but it's,
yeah. Even like I was walking through the city now, you reminded me again. I was walking through the city the other day and I was looking at I forget there's like so many colleges in the city in Manhattan. And I mean, even my undergraduate school, we had like a flagship campus in Manhattan. And I mean, it was open. You just kind of walked in and there was a security like table. And again, you show them like your ID. I mean, yes, again, it was pre-COVID, so you didn't have to show them like any vaccination record. But again, they would just like scan it or swipe it or anything like that, show that you were a student and you would walk in. But there is like a sense of availability for people who are visiting, and protocol for them as well. And the more that I think of it, the more it kind of feels more weird that Pratt doesn't have something like that. Especially because they have such I would even argue like a global outreach that like so locally they're so like restricted. Oh, you can't come in, but we're going to go everywhere else. Everyone else can
Mhm.
kind of, span out and we're going to spider out to all these people. So yeah, it feels very unnatural now that I begin to like kind of think about it more.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with me and to share
Of
your
course.
thoughts about Pratt and the community. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime. I was super excited to see that email from Ron. I was like, oh my gosh, your like storyboard is just like, you wanted to talk to like the same people, and it's just like very similar. I was like, that's so cool. There's just a lot of people. It's cool to see that there's a lot of people that are actually like, like, hey, this is like an issue, like,
Yeah.
and like Juan Camilo, one of my advisors, was like, yeah, maybe we could just, give this to the president at the end and be like,
Yeah,
here,
it'd be
like
a
what.
really awesome proposal.
Hmm. So I mean, I'm super excited to come up with recommendations and see how that goes, and continue working with you.
Of course. Yeah. Best of luck with everything.
You too.